welcome back everyone to episode 5. I'm excited. This is not a milestone, at least not yet. I want to leave that for future videos, but episode 5, I'm excited. This is good. This is awesome. We've come really far. I mean, farther than last time when I was all excited about episode 4, but now we're at episode 5. Now we have reason to be excited. So, getting right into it, this piece right here. Now this lovely thing was sent in to me, and the person was asking me to critique their lighting. They told me that they had not been drawing for a long time, and let me say, for the time you mentioned that you'd been drawing, this is actually quite nice. You've got really clean line art here, you've got nice base colors, everything looks really nice. It definitely looks like Sans. Like, I think he's a bit tall to be Sans, because Sans is kind of short, but I really don't know. I think it's more of a fandom thing where people either draw him like a midget or like a literal infant, but I don't know about that, so I think it looks really good. One thing I will say, though, is about this particular hand. Now don't worry, skeleton hands are really hard to draw. That is because they're literally just a structure. They're not like a normal hand because they don't have flesh on them. Skeleton hands have a lot of these joints, they have a lot of these fingers that taper out like this, and they're basically just extremely odd to draw because they're just not like anything you would see outside because they're literal bones. So maybe in the future I would say use a reference when you're drawing these sort of hands, because this to me looks like more like little beans that are kind of like strung together instead of hands. But it's not too distracting, it's okay. I would just say just emphasize this more because I feel like this is the one thing that really distracts me from the rest of the piece, because the rest of it looks actually quite nice. Also, the other thing that I feel distracts from this piece, and just note that it's not a bad piece, I think this is actually quite good for what you were trying to do, is the lighting. And if you guys have been keeping up with the series, you'll remember a piece from a few weeks ago that had a similar issue that was with, I can't remember his name, Azrael, there we go. His name, it was the character with Azrael, it was a drawing with Azrael in it, and Azrael here, like the picture was him in a cave, and the picture itself was actually quite nice. The line art was really good, and the character was actually really good, but the person had this issue with the lighting, where the lighting was just kind of a little too soft, especially for what was happening in the picture. Now what you have here is that you've got a really strong light source, which are these bones that he's able to fling at, I assume, Frisk, and kick Frisk's butt, or kick Char's butt, I don't know who. And you have this like really strong light source, but then you have kind of this like really light shadow back here, almost no shadow. So I would say the same thing that I said for that picture. You've got nice line art going on here, and a simple style is absolutely fine, but I would say that you should kind of add a darker shadow. The darker shadow will add more environment to the whole picture. It'll really bring everything together, and it'll make the light look brighter. Brighter lights mean darker shadows. That's kind of the rule. When you have a really bright light source that's singular, the shadows that will be away from that light source will be darker. It's kind of like where you have like a really bright flashlight on the side of a sphere, and then on the other side of the sphere you'll have an extremely dark shadow. You can Google pictures of different light sources and see what I'm talking about if I'm not making a lot of sense. But basically that's the general rule, and what you would do for that is just add a really dark shadow on the other side. So here I've taken a dark blue, right, and I've set it to multiply, and I've put this shadow over the character like this. Now again, this is really rough. This is not meant to actually like redo your picture, but if you want, you can go in and do something like this, where you just create a much darker shadow around Sans, because you have this nice light source here, but it'll look better if you have like a really dark shadow around it. That way, when you look at it, you're like, oh man, that's some intense light, because look at how dark the shadow coming off of it is because the light is so intense. Look at that. It's like a really big difference here. The light actually looks brighter because this shadow is so dark. And then you can kind of bring that out here, but like look, see? It's a big difference. It actually makes this eye look much brighter because of how dark it is. And also, a note with people who may put shadows like this over their drawings, the shadow you put, even if you set it to multiply, should never ever be black. You never want to use pure black when you make a shadow on top of something. Use a dark blue, dark violet, dark pink, dark red, or dark orange, but never black. Black always kills your drawings. Don't ever use dark black to shade something. Always use a dark blue, purple, or any other colors I mentioned. But yeah, this actually looks really nice. So what I would recommend to you would be to do more studies on humans and skeleton hands. I left you some references here, but if you go to Google and search skeleton hand references, you can find lots of very useful references that I think will help you out. And also, if you can, you should try and study a little bit more anatomy. Now, I would like to point out that Sans, as a character, is not a correct skeleton, and that's fine. I think he's a cute little character. But it will help you and make your stuff better if you have some sort of rooting in anatomy so you can stylize him a bit more. Say, working on his ankle bones down here and the bones in his hands and stuff like that. You can just work on that, and that'll really, really help you out with drawing him in the future. But yeah, this is actually a really solid piece. I would just say make a darker shadow so that way you're emphasizing that light more and this whole thing comes together a bit better. I left you these references here. Also, glad I wrote this down. I like how you've drawn his jacket. I understand that he is a very small character, so not a lot of wrinkles are needed, but I feel that it would make him look better if he had more wrinkles in his jacket. And the reason why is because he's assumedly jumping into the air. Now that's what I'm guessing here, right? So he's jumping into the air. He's about to fire his Gaster Blaster, and he's gonna fry Frisk into the next dimension or something. And you want this cloth to be more dynamic. You want there to be more flow. Because cloth, it always flows and moves with whatever you're doing. Now, it's kind of hard for me to fix this because you've already colored it, but just in the future, kind of observe cloth and see how it moves, see how it behaves when it's being folded over something. And plus, you have a lot of opportunity here because Sans is a skeleton. He has a lot of empty space under here, so that means that he has a lot of space where the cloth would drape over. Maybe add some more of these little peaks here to show off the fluff on his collar. I do actually enjoy when people draw Sans with a fluffy collar instead of the normal collar, even though when I drew him the one time, I drew him with a regular collar. The fluffy furry collar is actually kind of cool. It's a cool interpretation. So yeah, just add more wrinkles, make a stronger shadow. So work with shadow as well as you work with light. Light is important, don't get me wrong. A little glint, the slightest light can actually really, really bring out a piece. Like when you bring stronger lights together and you actually let that just kind of like the touches of light and touches of glow, that actually really brings out a piece. And you want to be very sparing with it as well. Like one thing that a lot of artists love to use is something called glow dodge, which most artists would know what that is. But basically it's this really strong filter that you can apply to your colors, which makes them really, really bright and almost have this glowy kind of after effect, and a lot of people love to use this. Now the thing is about it, glow dodge is like chocolate. You got to use it really sparingly because a little chocolate on some sweets is delicious, but when you have way too much sugar or sweetness or whatever on your stuff, it just obscures everything. So you don't want that. You just want everything to kind of just be touches of glow, touches of it here and there, just where it's needed. Because you want your piece to not distract. You don't want people to look at it and just see all this glow everywhere. You just kind of want people to be able to look at it and say, wow, that's so cool, there's Sans. Just touches of glow, touches of glow. Don't overdo it, just a little bit. See there, that little glow there did a lot, actually. It doesn't seem like much, but it actually is. It's a lot. It does a lot for the picture, it really helps, and it does bring everything out. So again, just work at shadows and work with light, but don't overdo it. Just remember to keep everything within step. Now, the next one we're going to be unpacking is this one. Now, I would like to say to the original artist who submitted me this piece, thank you very much. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of your pieces. She sent me 5 or so. But I do have a lot of other submissions, and I want to give everyone a chance to be able to submit and, you know, have a chance to get their stuff looked at. And I kind of already struggled to keep these episodes more than one piece per episode, so without wasting any more time, we'll get into this. And if you wish, you can submit another one at a time in the future so that I can look at that one as well. Now this piece actually has a lot to unpack. Now in your comment to me, you mentioned how you were really proud of this piece, but how you felt there was something wrong about the perspective. Now I actually have a couple of more issues with it aside from the perspective, but since you requested perspective, we'll go into that first. Now, perspective is actually quite a hard thing to really unpack and understand. So here is your piece, right? Now, I've mapped this out for you, so that way we can, you know, draw it out. In drawing, you can actually map out things, and you don't always need a 3D model program to do it. Of course, 3D model programs are helpful, and I'm not against them, but you should understand how to do it yourself without anything, so that way, when you do it, you actually understand what you're doing, and not just that the program's doing it for you. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever learned this, but I'll go ahead and say this. The different lines here are the horizon line, which is the original line that you begin with. You start with a line that's basically like the line that everything fades into and then is gone. The vanishing point, which is where everything converges and then everything disappears off into the distance. The orthogonal lines, which are the lines that you follow, your eye follows, and until they disappear into the vanishing point. And if you see, the image is actually the same if you reverse it. The mapping is the same as it should be, because you come all the way to the bottom and then you go all the way around. And the reason why this is necessary is so you can map out the bottom area here, because this area you can't see it unless you do the other way around. Now the reason why this is important is because when you draw perspective, especially with people, what you want to try and do is you want to try and fit your character in that box that you're creating. Like when you do perspective of buildings, you actually just follow the shape of, just follow this literal shape. And then you have your building, and it's perfect. But for an organic figure, it's much harder because what you're doing is the organic figure is not quite as easy to map out. So what you do is that you try your best to fit this organic figure inside of this box, which isn't an easy thing to do. It's actually quite difficult. But what you do is you try to fit them, oh dear, that light looks really bad. What you do is you try to fit them inside of this box, so that way you know that they are within perspective. And you can sometimes use digital tools to help you out. For example, I've just drawn this figure here, which I don't think is correct. So if I wanted to fix that, I can go to transform and free transform and actually correct the figure. And then I can bring it up more so it actually is more within perspective. Now you want to try avoiding this because even though it's quite easy to do, you don't want to depend on it. You want to be able to do it yourself without having the tools. And over here, let's see the picture again so I can see how he is. Okay. You want to try and fit the characters within the box. That way you know they're in perspective, because the boxes are in perspective, but the characters are not. See here, I'm trying to fit Jeff at the same angle that you did him in, but he's too large, so I have to move him up here, and I have to make room for his pelvis and for his legs, I would guess, and then his feet touching the box, and then his leg coming down. It's actually quite a difficult thing to do and requires a lot of practice. Now, I don't know exactly what your intention with this drawing is, but I'm going to assume it was something scary. So now that we fit these two characters in these boxes, right, and this is of course not perfect, but it's close enough to what we're seeing, we can compare it to what you did here. Now as you can see, let's ship him this way, look at the difference. These characters look like they're standing up straight, even though the sky and the moon are directly above them. Here you can see the difference, and you can see how much is missing from here. Now, another test I would like to point out in this piece is the flip test. Now, a lot of people are actually really afraid to reverse their drawings because when you reverse a drawing, it tends to look a lot worse than what it actually is. And my thing is, you shouldn't be afraid to do that, because doing that actually helps you see the errors in it. Now that we reversed it, we can see here that he's relatively okay, even though this chin's cutting in a lot. This head, however, is really squished. And by squished, I mean that, like, the way it is very odd. Like here, let me select the head for you, and then just change it so you can see what I'm talking about. Nope, dear. Select, there we go. Look what happens when I just take this head and I slightly distort it to try and fix it so it's within proportion more. Look at that. Now, when you take it back, you see how distorted it was. This has a lot to do with the perspective, but also because I feel that, again, you have less of an understanding of putting anatomy together as you do in what you're drawing. So when I look at this, it's really hard to imagine how you could do a perspective like this when you didn't measure it out and you don't quite understand the anatomy of these characters, which is okay. It's absolutely okay not to know how to do these things, because all you have to do is just practice them. Putting this image back, however, let's put this back here so we can actually see what we're doing again, and take off my two little figures. The boxes, I've highlighted them here so you can actually see what boxes they're supposed to fit in. Now you can see here that the reason why the perspective looks off is because Jeff would have to be standing in some way with his legs out like this if he was like crouching, and it would look quite odd. In fact, this leg would have almost no room, this arm would fit somewhere, and then his hand would be somewhere here. In fact, his hand is actually quite large. And then this character over here, his legs would be, I assume, like this, but they wouldn't be touching the ground. This character actually looks like he's standing up normally, like you were to see him from a right angle, right from front of him. He actually doesn't look tilted at all. And then there's this character here. I think what distracts most of all is the moon, because I guess you could say that the moon is coming, is not actually above them, but directly behind them. But I feel your intention was putting it above them, so I'm going to go with that assumption, and I think you should be able to map this out. There are lots of videos that actually teach perspective really well, so I'm going to leave those for you, so that way you can look at them and be able to study it. Set this image off to the side here so you can see. Now, the other qualm, aside from the perspective, before we move on from perspective, I actually want to recommend something for you. Now, this program here that I've just pulled up is called Design Doll. I'm going to leave a link for it in the description so everybody can download it, but basically what it is a program that allows you to pose and change the type of model you have from any doll and pose it any way you need it to be posed, so that way you can actually draw it. And with perspective, it actually comes in handy, because what happens is that, let's say I've put the character in the perspective, right? So let's say I want to draw him, but he's from a down perspective. I can move the model and just put it like this, and then I can draw it. And you can actually change the model's proportions any way you need to. Let's say it's a female, you can make it more female. They've got a lot of settings here. They've got a lot of different arms and shapes here. And this allows you to correct the model to the way that you want it to be. So that way you can actually draw it and draw it within perspective, which is great. That's why I highly recommend it. So this is what I think you should use for your future drawings. They actually come out with a mapping sheet. You can see these lines here. These are orthogonal lines. They are all vanishing. They're all going to a vanishing point. It's a little off the map, but that's okay. And you can correct it and move it, and it's really great because you can even go in with the hands and actually move hands and fingers. So that way you can correct the hand position and practice a lot of different hand positions. I think your perspective is going in the right direction, but you definitely need to map it out. Perspective, in a way, is like math. There's only one right way to do it. And if you don't do it, it's really obvious that you didn't do it right. Because with math, there's only one right answer. And with perspective, it's kind of the same. Even in Disney movies or cartoon movies, if you were to pause the movie at a cityscape and measure it out with perspective, you would see the perspective is actually correct. And animators take a good deal of time studying perspective and correcting it before they put it in their films. In fact, if you go to any art college, they'll be having you do a lot of this. In fact, I might do this in a future episode, but a lot of the college art homework that I have is just doing this. We would draw cubes and boxes and draw them in perspective. And they're really helpful because they help you map out things like this. This drawing could have been much more dynamic if you mapped it out. So I'm going to leave a tutorial for that in the description. Now, the other thing I wanted to address about this piece, which I believe I listed out here, is the coloring of the picture. Now, I understand this is a redo of an old picture, so I'm not going to gripe on the designs of the character too much, but something that I see about this particular picture is that the lighting, it doesn't drag me in. Here's the thing. This is creepypasta art. This is a character of yours, and this is Jeff the Killer. Now, the thing about the lighting is, look how warm these colors are. If you look at how warm these colors are, and really, pull them off to the side and, brush them out, you can see how warm and, actually friendly colors they are, which is not what you want for a piece like this. Look, when I grab these colors, the only colors that are actually kind of dulled are Jeff, but most of the colors that are taken up in this space are the sky and him. These guys take up most of the space, and their colors are all really, really warm. Now, warm colors can actually work in a scary picture if you oversaturate them. But in this case, they're actually in that level of saturation, but they're not exactly scary, and they're actually quite friendly. And this picture, it doesn't scare me. It doesn't make me feel intimidated. It doesn't make me interested. It's kind of there. Now, what I would do if I were you is bring down the saturation just a bit. Now, I've brought it down. The colors are still there, but they're not as bright as before. You can see the difference here. The difference being that the light now is not as focused on this big splooge of purple and actually has a bit more intrigue to it. Now, let's go over here and brighten it up a bit and then bring that contrast up just a little. Now, you don't want it too high because you don't want it to just have big blotches of black, but when you do that, you have this more feel where there's more of a focus on the moon. Now, let's go in and do a little more contrasting. Alright, so at this point in the video I decided to cut this out separately and speed it up so that way you can just see the process of what I do to kind of like touch it up and stuff. But basically, to summarize what I said during this point in time, you need to take more advantage of the atmosphere, more advantage of the light, more advantage of the characters, more advantage of the genre that you're drawing. This is a creepypasta. This is a scary piece. You really want to emphasize that. You want to go and break the boundaries of creepy. You really want to go in there. And you can do this with your style. You just need to really take advantage of that lighting. Really get in there. Really make people, you know, interested in these pieces. If you go in with like really basic shading, flat colors, and warm stuff, a lot of the intrigue is lost. And I feel that with the piece of what you're going for, you really just need to take it that extra mile. And I think you can do that. I think you can do that. And you'll see that even though I just messed around with this piece just for what amounted to about 8 minutes, you can do way more if you just take the time to actually, you know, kind of go in there with it. And I really believe in you, and I hope that this helps. So you can see the difference here. Now this is just me like playing with this just for a few minutes, but you can see the difference in the styles here. This looks darker. And even if you want to like emphasize the perspective without even changing anything, you can have moonbeams coming down, like the light just kind of like sparkling through these clouds, kind of breaking through, revealing the terribleness of what they're about to do. Something like that. Just like bring the whole scene together. Like make this actually scary. And that's the whole point of creepypasta. Some of the best creepypasta art that I've ever seen, like I've pulled up a couple, right? And these are two that involve Jeff the Killer, which are some of my favorites, which have extremely high contrast. They have just those touches and glints of red, and they have like that white that's just so unnatural. It's in the valley of uncanniness. And even though these are hyper realistic, you can take from these elements and throw them in here. You know, like emphasize that, you know? Take from this, which are actually scary, and employ them here. And the reason I'm emphasizing the scary point is because this picture that you've brought up here, I think you intended it to be scary. There's the moonlight, there's them, like you intended it to be scary. You intended for them to be looking menacing. You don't want people to look at this and say, "Aw, there's Jeff. That Jeffy, always just messing around." No, you want people to look at this and be like, "Oh man, that's Jeff. What's he about to do? What's he gonna do?" You just want people to look at this and really like get immersed in the picture. If I look at this, right, and I tell you, man, dude, I just can't, like, you know, I can't get involved in this because like the characters for me are just really not scary. You would say, well, how would I fix this? And then you kind of go in there and do the light thing I said. Again, it's all about lighting, it's all about perspective, and it's all about atmosphere. And you've got some pretty scary characters here, so take advantage of that. Like go in there and like just go crazy with it. Just really like show off these characters and make them to your full advantage. You know, like just kind of go crazy with it. Don't be afraid to play with light. Don't be afraid to play with you know, don't be afraid to play with different shadows and things. Like actually get in there and just add that atmosphere. You always want to go out the extra mile when it comes to adding an atmosphere, because once you do that, you bring the whole picture together. It's like a whole different atmosphere. Like look at this. This one right here. Like one last detail that I can do to really like make this thing stand out. Like right here. Right? Look at that. Look at that. And I didn't even have to do much. I just multiplied the layer. And then I can bring this down here, right? You just gotta be creative with these things. The perspective is one thing, but another thing is just these kind of things. You want to really just bring people out and make people scared of this, because that's the whole point of creepypasta. It's to scare people. And if you've missed that point with your art and with that genre, then you should consider altering that and changing your style of shading. Like, I pulled up this picture, and I know a lot of people already poked fun at it and talked about it, but this picture in particular is an example of what you are teetering on doing, but I would really implore you not to do. This piece has made Jeff into a girly, schoolgirl, emo boy scene kid. Like, when I look at this character, I don't see Jeff. I see a fangirly type character. And in this piece, like in your original thing, he's there. He's ready with the knife. He's going to stab somebody. But when I look at this, it's like, how do I be scared of this? And you want, and you can make him scary in your style. You don't have to make him hyper realistic like these two examples I've given here. But what you do want to do is actually get in there and take advantage of lighting and contrast. Just remember, contrast, lighting, just desaturate all those colors and saturate where you need to. Don't go crazy with it. Anyhow, I've definitely gone over the time limit, and I'm sorry for harping on this one too long. I feel like I've rambled for a long time. So thank you all for sitting through this. I'm going to try and edit this down as much as I possibly can. Also, to both artists, again, as I always say, these comments I have made are for your betterment. I am only hoping that you will take what I say with a grain of salt, do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and progress yourself in your own art in the future. Best of luck. Thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful day.
And just a side note, before we end this, any opinions I may have expressed about Jeff the Killer, negative or positive or whatever, or how I think you should draw him, are strictly my opinion. You can go and draw him whatever you want. Please don't come get me. Okay, bye.